There's something strange about being human. We are the only species on the planet that can reflect on our own mind. We can think about thinking, feel our feelings, watch ourselves from the inside, and yet we are almost completely blind to what's actually happening in there. You think you know when you're getting depressed. You don't. You think you know when anxiety is building. You don't. By the time you notice it, it's already been growing for days, sometimes weeks. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in all of psychology. The mind hides itself from itself. Not on purpose, not out of cruelty, just because that's how it works. Your brain doesn't send you a notification that says, hey, something is shifting, you should probably pay attention. It just shifts. And here's where it gets interesting, because a new kind of technology is emerging, one that doesn't rely on your self-awareness, one that watches the signals your conscious mind misses entirely. It's called AI-assisted precision psychology, and what it's discovered about human behavior changes how we understand the mind itself. Let's start with a simple question. How does a psychologist know how you're doing? You come in, you sit down, they ask, you answer. That's it. That's almost always it. 1 hour, every week, maybe every month. The rest of your life, the 167 hours between sessions, exists in a kind of darkness. No one sees it, not even you, clearly. Think about how strange that is. Your cardiologist doesn't just ask how your heart felt this week. They have data, continuous data, objective data, data that doesn't depend on what you remember or how much you want to admit. But in mental health, we have mostly relied on memory and mood and words chosen in a room where someone is watching. Psychologists have a term for this problem. They call it ecological validity. It means what you say in a clinical setting may have very little to do with what's actually happening in your real life. You walk into therapy, you feel slightly okay that day, so you say you're okay. But for the 6 days before, you barely left your bed. The system never saw those 6 days. That gap, that blind spot between appointments, is where most mental health crises actually begin. Here's what behavioral psychology has known for a long time. Before you feel depressed, you act depressed. Before you feel anxious, your body is already anxious. The symptoms come before the awareness. The behavior shifts before the feeling is named. You start sleeping differently, not because you decide to, but because something in your nervous system is reorganizing. You start moving differently, slower, less purposeful. You start speaking differently, fewer words, longer pauses, a flatness creeping into your voice that you don't hear, but that is measurable, acoustically, precisely. You start using your phone differently. You stop reaching out. You start scrolling instead of talking. You stop going to places you used to go. None of this feels significant in the moment. It just feels like a Tuesday. But to a machine learning model trained on thousands of people who have gone through depressive episodes, this pattern has a signature, a fingerprint, one that can be detected quietly, passively, through the sensors already in your pocket. Your phone's accelerometer notices you've stopped walking your usual routes. Your smartwatch notices your heart rate variability has dropped, a sign that your nervous system is under load. A voice analysis tool notices the flatness in a 30-second voice note you recorded without thinking. Individually, these signals are just noise. Together, they are a map of your interior state, more accurate in some cases than what you would report yourself. There's a concept in psychology called the observing ego. It's the part of you that watches yourself, that notices patterns, that can step back from experience and say, something is happening here. Most of us have a weak observing ego when it comes to mental health, not because we're broken, but because we're inside the thing we're trying to observe. That's like trying to read the label from inside the bottle. What AI-assisted precision psychology offers, at its most useful, is an external observing ego, a system that watches the signals you can't see, tracks the patterns across time, and says, gently, probabilistically, something may be shifting. It might be worth paying attention. Not to replace your awareness, but to extend it. Not to tell you how you feel, but to show you what your behavior has been saying, quietly, underneath the noise, for the past 2 weeks. Research from Stanford found that wearable sleep data could predict a depressive relapse up to 9 days before the person reported any symptoms. 9 days. That is an extraordinary amount of time to intervene, to reach out, to adjust. The University of Michigan found that passive smartphone data, just the texture of how people use their phones, could predict mood episodes in bipolar patients before they consciously registered the change. The body knew. The behavior knew. The mind, as usual, was the last to find out. This technology tells us something important, not just about mental health, about human nature itself. We are not as self-aware as we believe. This is uncomfortable, but it's one of the most well-replicated findings in all of psychology. Daniel Kahneman spent a career demonstrating that humans systematically misread their own mental states. We confabulate, we rationalize, we construct narratives after the fact and call them insight. We are the unreliable narrator of our own story, and yet our bodies are not lying. Our sleep patterns are not performing for an audience. Our voice acoustics are not performing. Our phone behavior at 2 in the morning is not performing. These are the raw signals, unfiltered, unedited, unrehearsed. And what they reveal, to a system that knows how to read them, is a version of you that is more honest than the version that walks into a therapy room and says, "I've been doing pretty well, actually." This is both humbling and strangely liberating. Humbling because it confirms what the best psychologists have always known. Self-report is limited. Memory is reconstructed. Insight is earned, not automatic. Liberating because it means there is another way to be known, a way that doesn't depend entirely on your ability to find the words.
But here is where we have to slow down and think carefully. Because whenever we discover a new way to see inside a person, we have to ask who is doing the seeing and why, and what they will do with what they find. The same data that helps a caring clinician intervene early could, in different hands, become something else entirely. Behavioral data is intimate data, perhaps the most intimate data that exists. It knows when you stopped sleeping, when you stopped going out, when your voice lost its color, when you were at your most fragile, before you even knew it yourself. That kind of knowledge is a responsibility. Not every platform will treat it as one. The question is not whether this technology should exist. It should. The need is real. The suffering it could prevent is real. The question is, who builds it, who controls it, who has access to it, and whether the person at the center, the patient, the human, remains the one it was built to serve.
There is an old idea in psychology that healing begins with being seen. Not fixed, not diagnosed, not analyzed, just seen. Seen accurately, seen before the crisis, seen in the moments you couldn't find the words. That is what this technology, at its best, is reaching toward. Not a replacement for human care, but an extension of it, a way of saying, we noticed. Before you could tell us, we noticed. The mind hides itself from itself. That has always been true. But for the first time, we are building systems that can gently, carefully, with the right intention, hold up a mirror. And what we see in that mirror might finally give us the time we need to reach someone before it's too late. That is not a small thing. That is everything.
If this video made you think, even slightly differently about your own mind, then it did what it was supposed to do. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not because it's a great video, but because the idea matters. And some people in your life might need to know that the signals they're sending are real, even when they can't find the words for them. If it made you think, leave a comment below. Tell me what shifted, what question it left you with. I read them, all of them. And if you want to keep exploring how the human mind actually works, not how we pretend it works, not the motivational version, the real version, then subscribe. There is more coming. Until next time, pay attention to what your behavior is saying, because your mind is always sending signals. The only question is, who is listening?